Welcome back, everyone. Today is a bit different video. We are talking about Batman Arkham Origins. We're talking about the base game as Warner Brothers has delisted all the DLCs, so I couldn't even download those if I wanted to. I'm joined by my friend Cade from his channel. He runs a movie channel called We're Talking Movies, and I've been on it a couple of times.
Hey Max, thanks so much for having me on. Really great to be here. Yeah, I have my own channel. We're talking movies. If you guys want to check that out, feel free. But yeah, Max, thanks so much for having me. Really excited to talk about this game with you.
Awesome. So Batman Arkham Origins, it's a 10-year-old game. It's a little bit over 10 years old. Do you remember back in 2013 when that game launched? Do you remember what your initial impressions were of that game?
Yes, I do. I remember when that game came out back in 2013. I remember being excited and also nervous at the same time. Excited because it was another entry in the Arkham franchise, which I adored, but I was also nervous because I knew it was made by a different studio. The one thing I remember most was just the reaction that most people had. A lot of people loved it, a lot of people hated it, and I don't think there was ever anyone who was in between. It was either love or hate. And when I finally played the game, I was satisfied for the most part. I could see why people weren't reacting too well to it, but I did enjoy it a lot.
Yeah, I thought there was a lot of uncertainty with Rocksteady back then with if they were going to even make more Batman games because it seemed like Arkham Knight, they said it was pretty final, or not Arkham Knight, Arkham City was pretty final, but they actually had started production on Arkham Knight around the same time Arkham Origins was announced. But I remember playing it. I got it for free on my computer because I got a Origin laptop gaming computer for a birthday, and it came with an install code for that game. And I remember being like, it's not that bad. I thought it was a little hard to play on a computer, but I still liked that game. Maybe reviewers maybe swayed my opinion a little, being like, it's not that good of a Batman game comparatively to its others, but I don't know. I feel like Warner Brothers Montreal was given maybe they were given the skeletons of an Arkham game, and they what they made was pretty good. I thought upon replaying it, I thought it was very serviceable.
Well, and just adding on to that, I will say that when I played the game, I did enjoy the gameplay a lot, and I thought the graphics were great for the time. I really loved the voice acting, especially Troy Baker as the Joker, I really liked. And I know that one issue that a lot of people had with the game was they thought that the gameplay lacked a lot of innovation, when compared to the first two games. And on some level, I can kind of agree, but there were aspects of the gameplay that I did really enjoy.
Right.
I really enjoyed some of the new gadgets, like the remote claw. I thought that that was such a fun gadget to have for an open world game.
Yeah, I thought the new gadgets were cool, and I think they kind of did a little innovating. I think Arkham Origins, at least, I think was the first game. I know was the first game to really use more of the Batman detective vision where you can like rewind crimes. I don't think City uses it at much or if at all. I can't remember. There's that really good level where Batman's investigating the alleged murder of Black Mask. So, and I remember the first time playing that back then and playing it again, I'm like, this is a really good use of the detective mode.
Yeah, I agree. I really enjoyed the detective elements also. I think that that's one of the best things about the Arkham games as a whole, just the ability to use all the detective elements. And I really did like the new evidence scanner that this game had, where you could kind of rewind or fast forward through crime scenes and see what happened. I thought that that was a really cool aspect. And I like how they brought it back. I think they brought it back in Arkham Knight, which was really cool. But yeah, that was definitely a fun aspect of the game. And I know that one other thing that people had was, and I'm sure you're aware of this, a lot of people had an issue with the presence of technical issues and bugs. And well, I get what they're saying, but usually I try to just ignore that stuff unless it's super, super present. And I never had too many issues with that. What about you?
On PC back when I played it back then, I didn't really have any technical issues, but ironically, because usually PC is the platform that gets the most. But when I was playing it on the S Series X, I had two crashes, and I noticed that the crashes were coming from the overuse of the grappling hook. Like if you grappled way too many times consecutively, you'd hard crash the game. And I think with the processing speed of the Series X, that I think it just hard crashes the game. So I think that might be just new gen hardware versus an old gen emulation. The technical performance of that game was pretty good. I didn't really have that many problems even when it originally came out.
Oh yeah, me neither. I just had a couple of issues with it where, you could kind of notice it. And Yeah, again, when I see that, I try to just ignore it and say,
Yeah,
okay, it's just a bug. That doesn't matter.
I still think it's nothing like that was like, oh, this ruins the experience. I have another question for you. This is the origins to the Arkham Batman. We're experiencing like his first, I guess, really long night because each Arkham's game is about like a very long night in Batman's career. I'm wondering where that story stands with you among the other Arkham games. Is it just as top quality as them, or do you think that Arkham Origins, in a way, is pretty different? What was your overall opinion with that story?
Well, I do think that when it comes to Arkham Origins, just from a story perspective, yeah, it is my least favorite entry in the franchise, but that doesn't mean that I dislike it. I think the story is pretty decent. I don't think it's as deep as the first two games, Asylum and City, but I still do enjoy it for the most part. I really liked the idea of focusing on a younger Batman who's a lot more reckless and unhinged compared to the first two, where he was more seasoned and experienced. I also liked how the game focused a whole bunch on crime and corruption, just all the stuff that really plagues Gotham, which was really fun to see because the first two games were mainly about his rogues gallery. It wasn't too much about everything else that's going on in Gotham, which I really appreciated. And I also loved the idea of Batman being targeted by all these different assassins. Deathstroke, Deadshot, Bane, Shiva, all these guys. It was so fun. And that's one of the things that I always appreciate about these games. They include so much mythology that it's so fun to see because as someone who is a Batman fan, and I know you're also a big Batman fan, so I think you might appreciate this as well, is just each of these games, Origins included, they include so much lore that if you were to play these games for the very first time and you had no experience with Batman, you would get so much knowledge through them.
Yeah, I think I think that's pretty good because I did not know who Shiva was the first time I played this game, and so you do learn about like new Batman villains when you bring up Anarchy, the Batman villain. A lot of people I'd say were probably going to know him because of Batman Arkham Origins because he's the first villain side quest that you get in the game. But yeah, they do pack a lot of smaller rogues gallery members alongside the bigger names.
Yeah, and I think one other thing that's really cool about the story is I really did like how it included Batman's first encounter with the Joker. And I think it kind of makes sense because it's hard to imagine one of these games without the Joker, at least when you're playing from Batman's perspective. So I did enjoy that. And I know that one big criticism that a lot of people had was they were upset to find out that Black Mask was actually the Joker when he was posing as him to hire all the assassins. And my whole theory with that is people weren't upset that they didn't think that it was a bad reveal or anything. I think people were kind of disappointed that it was about the Joker again, because he had been the main threat of Asylum and with City. You also had people like Ra's al Ghul and Hugo Strange, but if you really narrow it down at the end, Joker is really the true villain of that game too. So I think people were probably hoping that someone else was the main threat for Arkham Origins, which was supposed to be Black Mask, but then it turns out to be Joker. And yeah, so my whole theory of that is people didn't think that it was a bad twist or anything. I think people were just hoping for a different villain for the game.
They kind of bait and switch you, but playing Arkham Origins again, I really do enjoy the young Joker, young Batman dynamic, and I think it works better for the story. There's only so much you can do with Roman Sionis. Um, and like if you like, I don't know, if you look at like Birds of Prey, the movie, like they really do have to stretch that character out a lot for him to be a good villain because I feel like Black Mask is always like this street level villain that is like a first real challenge for Batman, but like for a video game, I don't think you could do a whole video game with Black Mask as your villain.
Yeah, because I think after the reveal where Joker is the true mastermind behind everything, I think Black Mask is kind of just reduced to a side villain where you have to go out and destroy all his drugs, which, yeah, I guess kind of makes sense because I think, like you said, there's only so much that you can do with his character.
I think what the really interesting thing is that they hired Troy Baker to play to like masquerade as Black Mask and reveal himself as Joker, but Roman Sionis, who is actually Black Mask, has a different voice actor, which I think that was a really interesting choice that I didn't notice the first time I played the game when I was younger. But I really like that Joker that they kept it authentic and they didn't just switch the voice actor the moment Black Mask was Joker. It was Troy Baker doing a Black Mask voice and then morphing it into a Joker voice during the reveal. And I thought that was probably a really good artistic choice made by the voice crew, the acting crew, the voice talent of that game.
Yeah, and I think two things that I really praise the story of this game for. This is about more about story and gameplay, but here's what I give it a lot of credit for. So I really like how the story of the game takes place in Gotham. I mean, you obviously don't get to explore all of Gotham, just a small portion of it. But what I like about it is it's the first Arkham game where you're not in an environment that you're basically trapped. Because in Asylum, you were trapped on Arkham Island. In City, you're trapped in Arkham City, which is a closed off section of Gotham, but it's still a huge prison facility. And in Arkham Origins, what's cool about it is that, again, while it's a small portion of Gotham, it's an environment where you're not exactly trapped in. So that's, I think, what was kind of fun.
I thought that the Gotham map, even though you kind of as you're playing it, you're like, oh, it is kind of a bit of a recycled version of the city map. But I mean, once again, you're giving a smaller studio because Warner Brothers Montreal is not big and currently still pretty new to the development scene because they really only ever released Gotham Knights after this. Yeah, you're gonna get a bunch of recycled assets, but I think what they did and they were able to kind of remove the elements of Arkham City and still make it feel a little bit new, even though there's some noticeable like changes or noticeable familiarities with Arkham City's map. I still think that Gotham it's pretty great. And I actually my thing I that really worked was like the Gotham PD scanner where like you would Batman would intercept calls the from the Gotham City Police Department and he could go and find crimes and interfere with them, which is something that Spider-Man does later on in 2018. So I it was fun. It was kind of cool to see that mechanic in this game.
Yeah, and I think another thing that I give the game a lot of credit for is I like how it's the only game, if you think about it, where you really get access to the Batcave. Because in Asylum, there was a spare Batcave built beneath the Asylum on the island. And in City, you don't get to explore the Batcave, and you don't get to explore it in Night either. So what I like about this game is that it's the only one, if you really think about it, where you actually get to explore the Batcave underneath Wayne Manor, which I give the game a lot of credit for.
And it's like a really nice bat cave too. Like you have the bat computer, you have the landing platform, and then you have the little workbench. And you don't really need more than that. But they also are able to turn the bat cave into this really personal moment between him and Alfred as he's a couple times. One of the times being when he goes back out to stop the mercenaries and Alfred's trying to stop him from getting like he's like you can't do this. You can't keep doing this. You're going to get killed. This is the last thing I want to bring up of the story. Do you think that they kind of they realize they write a kind of weird plot hole that Bane knows who Batman is, so last second they have to kind of write it out by making Bane go too crazy on the Venom that he instead of when he's reaching for Batman on the final part of the fight, he's trying to save Bruce, and then he goes Batman, and then he gets knocked out, and then he somehow in the other games forgets that he knows who Batman is.
I think that that might have been a possibility because I wonder, when I was first playing the game, I thought, wait, so Bane found out that Bruce Wayne is Batman? How's this supposed to work if this takes place before the other two games? But I like how they added in some, a little bit of an excuse when they said that the TN1 that he was working on could erase your memory. I thought, okay, I guess that works. But one thing I do like about it is the Joker twist when it's revealed that he was Black Mask, I'd say that's one twist in the game. I would say that the reveal that Bane finds out that Bruce Wayne is Batman is also kind of a twist because it also shows, oh wow, this is a turn of events. Like, how is this going to get resolved? And you wouldn't expect that to happen because it's a prequel. So I give the game credit for that, but yeah, I kind of see what you're saying, and I kind of agree. I wonder if they realize later on, oh wait, we need to figure out how Bane's never going to remember that Bruce Wayne is Batman. So yeah, I agree.
But speaking of Bane, and along with Bane and Deathstroke, as you mentioned earlier, there are a lot of rogues in this game, a lot of which are boss fights. There are plenty of boss fights with the assassins that are hunting down Batman, and there's a few that aren't the assassins there, but they are still fights. Is there any fight that you liked in the game that stand out in particular, since these are, some of the more memorable parts of the Arkham series?
Yeah, I have two actually. One of them is definitely, in my opinion, one of the best boss fights in the entire franchise. That's the Deathstroke boss fight. I've always seen that as a very memorable part of this game. when I first played it and I fought Deathstroke at the beginning, it was kind of annoying because when you're fighting him, it's a lot different from how you're fighting other characters in the game, where you get to just counter their attacks and attack back. But instead, with this, you had to really time the attacks and counter them when you needed to. And then, Deathstroke could also counter you. But what I really liked about it was as I kept playing it and trying to beat him, because it took me a while, I just thought, oh, so this is really where you get to be tested based on all your experience with this game that you've had and the past two games, because it's really testing your combat to see how good you really are. So I appreciated that because it really challenged me, which was nice when I was playing the game. So yeah, I definitely love the boss fight of Deathstroke in the game, and I think that that's definitely again like one of the best boss fights in the entire franchise.
Yeah, I think some of the better games, or for some of the better encounters in the Arkham series, are the ones that not only test your combat flow knowledge, but your gadget knowledge, which the Deathstroke fight does both. Does test your reaction more than your gear knowledge, but it does give you the zip line, the remote claw right before it, and it's like it starts ringing a bell like, hey, remember the remote claw? Like you have to counter Deathstrokes, the propane canisters. You have to counter them with the claw, but also you can stun Deathstroke by throwing batarangs at him, which I didn't realize until like maybe partway through the fight. That was another way to counter him. And what you said, you had a second fight that you liked. Which one was that?
Well, it's not exactly a boss fight. I just wanted to bring it up because it's always stuck with me. It's the Electrocutioner boss fight before Deathstroke. I
Oh
don't know
yeah.
why. I don't know why. It's just when you just show up. I actually thought when I was first playing the game that we were gonna have a fight with Electrocutioner, and I was kind of looking forward to it. But then you just click the attack button, and then you strike him. He jumps up and he kicks him in the face, and then he's down.
Yeah.
It's I know it's not really a boss fight. It's just always stuck with me because all I could think was, there's no way. You gotta be. But it's funny because it's kind of similar to, I don't know if you played this game, it's similar to the Spider-Man 2 game from back in 2004, not the one from last year, the one based off the movie with Tobey Maguire where you fight Mysterio and you just take him down with one punch and then that's it. It just
Yeah,
reminded me of that.
I definitely was thinking about that. I never played Spider-Man 2, but I do know about enough about that game to know about the fake out Mysterio fight. And I think that's exactly what Warner Brothers Montreal went for. I think they wanted to fake you out, and like, maybe it was a budget limitation thing, but I think even if it was a budget limitation, they couldn't make a fight for Electrocutioner. I think that was a really funny thing to do, was just to knock him out. But I also think it shows um they needed to show a like how strong this current Batman was, and like that he wasn't just like a novice Batman. And I think he knocks out one of his first assassins in one go is a really good is a really good way of displaying that. And I think you have to find creative loopholes in game development. So whatever caused the Electrocutioner to not have an actual boss fight, I think it became more iconic than maybe getting players annoyed that they didn't actually get to fight the Electrocutioner. I think a lot of people remember that more fondly because it is kind of a joke. And
Yeah,
then
it is. I agree.
on replay, I actually liked the Copperhead fight. I thought the Copperhead fight was a really good test of your combat flow, but also that you have to identify the real Copperhead during the fight. Um, and not and it just like there's so many enemies on screen, it feels overwhelming. But once you get like a really good combat flow going in that fight, and then you understand like building combos and then pressing Y and B to get an instant knockout on something, and then you use that on the real Copperhead once you can kind of identify how she's moving around the arena. So I think the more you have invested in Batman's fighting in that game, the more fun the Copperhead fight actually is. But I know a lot of people might bring up the Bane fight, how it's more of a horror fight because he you kind of fight him briefly, and then he turns into like Titan Bane, and he tries to rip you out of like the vents. He's looking for you, and you have to kind of play a literal game of cat and mouse. You're like Tom and Jerry in that fight at one point, where Batman's throwing him into walls, throwing him into traps. So that's another fight that I know some viewers might bring up, and it's a pretty good fight, but it wasn't my favorite personally.
Yeah, I get what you mean. I wonder if it was Warner Brothers Montreal's way of trying to do a stealth fight that was kind of similar to the Mr. Freeze boss fight from Arkham City, which is a little bit more of a stealth boss fight, and I know that that's often ranked as one of the best boss fights in the franchise, and I agree. But I wonder if, the final boss fight with Bane was kind of inspired by that in a way.
It definitely did feel like that because where Mr. Freeze is innovative, you can't use the same gadget twice on Mr. Freeze. Um, Bane just seems to be programmed to look and investigate on the last hiding place more than he is likely to fall for the same trap. Other than that, I think when I was fighting him, I noticed that he just kind of also seems to be programmed to notice player movement more because sneaking up on him is really hard because the moment Batman gets within like a foot of him, he spins around. But that's really the only thing I noticed about that fight. That yeah, it could be their attempt to make a Mr. Freeze fight, but it definitely isn't as good as the Mr. Freeze fight. But yeah, we'll move on to our last question here. So overall, you said that this isn't your favorite of the series, but what would you give it like a score out of 10? What would you score Arkham Origins?
I think for me, on a scale of 1 to 10, I would probably give it a 7.5, probably. Because again, it is my least favorite from a story perspective, but I still think it's a decent story overall. And I do like most of the gameplay, and I did have some issues with that. But no, for the most part, I think it is a decent game, and I think it's a worthy entry in the Arkham franchise. But yeah, I think I'll give it a 7.5 out of 10.
That's yeah, that's fair. I would probably score it around like a hard 7, maybe like a maybe an 8, but I'm probably gonna settle with a 7 too. Mainly because I think the game it feels like an expansion upon stuff that already existed in Arkham City. Um, but I do like the story a lot more now, and I have a bigger appreciation for the story than I did back in 2013. And I feel like I can't really rate it higher because for some reason every other thing that could have enhanced the game, like the DLCs, they're all delisted, and I just can't play them. So I wish I could because I feel like that could impact my score a little bit more. So that's my score, 7 out of 10. But Cade, thank you so much for coming on this brief call with me and talking about Batman. If you guys like Batman, you should check out Cade's channel. We're talking movies. I'll put it in the description. He talks about Batman and I talk about Batman with him on one of the episodes, which was our favorite movie or adaptations in like TV and movies. Um, and you also released another one with your dad, right? Where you were talking about the best animated Batman movies.
Yep, we did.
Yeah, those are. So if you like Batman, check out Cage's channel. It's really cool. It's really good. He has a lot of interesting guests.
Thanks for having me on, Max.
Thank you, Cade.